This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
China says it is confident it will put in place laws to safeguard national security in Hong Kong. South Africa to ease a lockdown and reopen the economy on June the 1st. And Nigerians in IDP camps struggle to adhere to anti-COVID-19 measures. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and I'll be with you for the next hour. Here for the latest in business is Uche.
Thank you, Hannah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live. Nigeria records a slowed first quarter growth as effects of the coronavirus begin to show. And South Africa's taxi sector steps up its safety measures as the country prepares to ease restrictions. Of course, more on that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Uche. We'll see you in a bit. We begin in Beijing, where the National People's Congress has held its second plenary session. Chinese President Xi Jinping joined lawmakers as they listened to reports by the NPC Standing Committee and the country's high-ranking judiciary officials. Standing Committee Chairman Li Jiangshu highlighted the legislature's priorities, among them strengthening public health, ensuring the implementation of a ban on wildlife consumption, and safeguarding order in the special administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau. Well, staying with those developments, here is our reporter Zhu Yung with more details from today's secondary plenary session.
At the second plenary meeting of the National People's Congress on Monday, 3 major reports were delivered. Well, the first one is a work report of the NPC Standing Committee. Chairman of the NPC Standing Committee, Li Jiangshu, reviewed their work in 2019 and the first few months of 2020. And he said the committee has worked to ensure the full implementation of the Constitution in all aspects of state governance, improve working system for supporting and serving deputies in law-based performance of their duties, etc. And also, since the beginning of the outbreak, the NPC Standing Committee has acted and also responded promptly with the measures such as issuing the decision to completely ban the illegal trade and consumption of wildlife in order to protect against the public health risks. And he also outlined the main work for the remaining months of this year, including the full enforcement of Constitution, strengthening legislative work in key areas such as prioritize the legislation on public health by revising the law on prevention and control of the infectious diseases, the emergency response law, etc. Well, besides, the head of Chinese judicial and procuratorial organs also delivered their annual report. Chief Justice Zhou Qiang said in the past year, the Supreme Court has punished crimes, protected the people, and also resolutely safeguarded national security and also the social security in accordance with the law. And over 38,000 cases were handled in 2019, and also about 34,000 have been concluded. That's up around 10% and also 8% respectively year on year. And on strengthening the intellectual property protection, which is an issue that is not only at the center of attention here in China, but also in many other countries around the world, Chinese courts concluded over 410,000 cases related to the intellectual property rights, in 2019. And also China has now become the country who handled the biggest number of such cases with the shortest length of dealing time. And finally, the Procurator General Zhang Jun said the Procuratorate has based its work on people's increasing demands for democracy, the rule of law's fairness, as well as justice. And he also called for keep improving their capabilities in law enforcement to meet the higher public expectations.
China has once again warned against foreign interference after the U.S. threatened sanctions over the security bill for Hong Kong. Li Shin spoke to Rita Fan, former president of Hong Kong's Legislative Council.
The United States president has actually warned that the U.S. would react very strongly if the bill was approved. And last year, there was also this U.S. legislation which very strongly positioned the United States in a stronger position to interfere in Hong Kong's affairs. How do you look at this legislation and its impact on the position of Hong Kong for the United States in this part of the world?
I think the United States under President Trump has been trying every possible means to stop the development of China as a global power. So Hong Kong is an easy prey. Hong Kong is an international city. We are a city without border. You can come in and out. And people with very dubious background can easily come into Hong Kong. And Hong Kong's young people can easily go to Taiwan or to the United States or to Europe. We know that in Taiwan, they go there and they are quite open about it. They receive some training. And in Hong Kong, we have also videos on the internet where we see foreigners training them how to shoot an arrow. I think Hong Kong is the victim of the Trump administration trying to dominate the world and put down China. And if Hong Kong is not there, they will find something else. I'm afraid this is going to go on for a while until it becomes clear to the whole world that violence and instigation, subversion, succession, all these things really doesn't help the well-being of the human race. Let's put down the weapon. Let's talk. Let's trade. That is to the benefit of everyone.
The convening of China's two sessions has been closely watched by various political leaders on the African continent. In Namibia, the Southwest Africa People's Organization has commended the Chinese government for putting the interests of the Chinese people first in their governance policies.
Even though under these difficult circumstances they find the government and the people, the CPC finds themselves in, they still have to sit and go ahead with the two sessions and discuss and come up with these or highlights that the government came up with. And this highlights is going to benefit, is to the advantage of the Chinese socialists. People's concerns such as employment, education, healthcare, housing, and pension should be taken care of. So the government of China is going to take care of all this according to the highlights of the two sessions that is currently going on. So I make out of it that China is a people-centered government. They have the system of people-centered. So the people, citizens comes first, then other things.
Meanwhile, in Morocco, experts there say China's expansion, promotion of trade, investment, and development is unwavering.
Chinese leaders have repeatedly stressed the need to eliminate such unilateral protectionism. Different countries in the world are willing to respond positively to eliminate barriers, pursue a better way of cooperation, and after the Belt and Road Initiative was launched, countries around the world responded positively. We want to keep an open world economy with investment opportunities, trade, and cultural exchange.
And now let's take a look at the latest on the coronavirus pandemic in Africa. Egypt has announced that it has lost 11 health workers to the disease. The number of medical staff infected in that country now stands at 2,091. In Kenya, coronavirus cases have risen to 1,286 after 72 more people tested positive on Monday. Meanwhile, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, while announcing the planned easing of some lockdown measures, warned that the outbreak was likely to get worse in the country. South Africa has the highest number of cases on the continent, having recorded over 23,000 cases so far. In Côte d'Ivoire, thousands of children have returned to school after that country became one of the first West African countries to restart lessons after a 2-month shutdown. Authorities say that with extra hygiene measures, students can study safely. There are now over 112,000 COVID-19 cases in Africa, with a number of countries imposing various prevention and containment measures to curb the spread of the virus. Over 3,000 people have succumbed to the disease across the continent. Tanzanians are celebrating what they believe is a victory in combating the spread of COVID-19 in their country. President John Magufuli says the number of coronavirus patients has declined. In Dar es Salaam, Regional Commissioner Paul Makonda asked residents to celebrate that development in whatever way they could. Tanzania has confirmed 509 cases of COVID-19 and 21 deaths. CGTN's Isaac Lukanda reports.
These churchgoers are in a celebratory mood. The Tanzanian government says the number of coronavirus patients in the country is going down, and it has now called for 3 days of Thanksgiving. The pastor of this church sees a reason for celebration.
We are seeing people recover, and so just that shows that we have nowhere else to go except to run to the house of the Lord and tell God, thank you for what he is doing in the country.
Residents of Dar es Salaam have been asked to dress up to celebrate, with some shops even offering discounts on clothing items. However, some critics have accused the government of downplaying the risks of the pandemic. The Dar es Salaam Regional Commissioner thinks otherwise.
As our president said, given our situation and projections by experts in the world, what we have is nothing short of a miracle.
While there is encouragement to get out and celebrate, there are some who have chosen to stay indoors.
The government has assured to us that the number of the cases has dropped significantly. So this is something which I'm really happy, and I'm happy because now life can get back to normal, although precautions against this disease has to be still there.
The Tanzanian government has not released any new figures on confirmed COVID-19 cases. This is due to ongoing investigations into the operations of the national laboratory. Some people believe that the worst is now behind them.
The fear of COVID-19 has diminished. Why? On my part, the rate of the coronavirus patients has gone down daily from the initial number, and I have stayed indoors for a long time, so I thought it best to go out today and get some fresh air.
The government's announcement of a reduction in the number of coronavirus patients seems to have given some citizens a renewed sense of hope. This beach has been empty in recent weeks, but now has people flocking to it, a sign that perhaps things may be slowly returning to normal. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Refugees living in Ethiopia's urban areas have been forced to depend on the assistance from the UNHCR and well-wishers to survive during the pandemic. Many of them are unemployed and struggle to fend for themselves. And as CGTN's Kuleta Wanjohi reports, the UN Refugee Agency is now offering additional support to those living inside its camps.
Refugee children in Addis Ababa receive food assistance. There are over 1,200 children in the city who either fled to Ethiopia unaccompanied or were separated from relatives en route from countries like Eritrea, Yemen, Somalia, Sudan, and South Sudan.
We're in lockdown in Ethiopia, especially where refugees cannot move around and top up with the meager needs that they have. I mean, the meager incomes that they have. So it's very clear their needs, and we're trying to top up what the government is trying to provide here today.
There are about 27,000 urban refugees living in Addis Ababa. The UN Refugee Agency says that because of the pandemic, it has changed the way it helps these refugees and the over 700,000 living in camps across the country.
For instance, now we're not doing biometrics, we're not doing fingerprinting because that's a hygiene component. We've taken that out and we use photos instead, and we use other means. We've had to redo or rethink the modalities that we use, but it is possible. We have done food distribution. Also, people come in smaller groups. So the agency has received some additional funds as well.
Globally, UNHCR has called for an extra $490 million as part of the UN's revised $6.7 billion appeal for COVID-19 to help strengthen national health and sanitation systems. But the pandemic adds further uncertainty about the future for these refugees. Colette Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
South Africa has started to gradually ease its strict coronavirus lockdown, but after confining its citizens for 8 weeks, the continent's most advanced economy has seen a sharp increase of people in dire need of food assistance. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
As South Africa battles COVID-19, people have been unable to work during the country's lockdown. Thousands are hungry, and these echoing scenes are being seen across South Africa. There are no easy answers on how to fix this, but for humanitarian Marilyn Bassin, she can't wait any longer.
Stop lockdown. You've got to lift lockdown. This is crazy, crazy, crazy. Lift lockdown. My heart is breaking for these people here. Can't live on 4 slices of bread a day. Lift lockdown. We've got a plague upon us, and now we've got a famine. And for all of those people who are saying that lockdown must stay because they might be protected, they don't know what's going on out here. These people, in fact, there are something like 10 times the amount of people who are going to die from starvation. It is something like 5 to 10 times those people who would have died of the virus. It's now enough. You can't do this to these people anymore.
For the most vulnerable, it's a choice between food or risking infection. Many here are foreign nationals and they don't qualify for government grants. The lockdown has pushed them out of their informal jobs, and now they have nowhere to turn to.
Most of the people, they are not working, they are starving, they don't have food to eat. Some, well, they don't have some money of the rent. So the life is very hard. We are also scared with corona, and also we don't have food.
I come to get food because I don't have money to buy food to the shops. Come here 3 times a week to find food for me to survive my life.
COVID-19 cases continue to rise in South Africa, but so does this hunger crisis. Relying on a simple pre-cooked porridge powder will save many from starvation.
I've seen since lockdown that the food crisis has been brought more into light, and it's surfaced more in the public. So this food crisis has always been there, but COVID has shown how extreme it is and how desperate people are. In COVID, people have been struggling to access food more.
South African government announced a historical $26 billion relief package to support the economy and the country's most vulnerable people. But many here don't believe that help will ever reach them. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break and return. More news making headlines. Africa Day. The continent marks the 57th anniversary of the establishment of the Organization of African Unity. Nigerians in IDP camps struggle to adhere to anti-COVID-19 measures.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. You're watching News Making Headlines right here on Africa Live. Well, the continent is celebrating Africa Day. The day was officially marked on 25th May in 1963 when the Organization of African Unity, now known as the African Union, was formed. The day was to commemorate the fight against colonialism. This year, though, due to the coronavirus pandemic, the celebrations have been moved online under the theme Silencing the Guns. They include a special virtual broadcast featuring speeches by AU leaders, Cyril Ramaphosa, Musa Faki Mahamat, with a special guest appearance by former Zambian President Kenneth Kaunda. The African Union Commission has also organized an Africa Day benefit concert. The 2-hour event will feature some of Africa's big names in music. Well, for more on this, we are now joined by Dr. Jumei Fei, a researcher on political development strategies and also the Secretary General of the IPIC, Pan-African Federalist Movement. He joins us via Skype. Now, thank you so much for joining us from New Jersey. The current international order has changed a lot from the one of the 1960s when Pan-Africanism was being born. How is Africa adopting?
Thank you very much for having me on your show. This is really an honor to be celebrating the 57th anniversary of the birth of the Organization for African Unity. The situation has changed in the world since independences. At that time, there was a fight for independence, at least regaining part of the sovereignty of our state. Today, we have come to realize that since then, that yes, we did get some independence, some portion of our independence, but we're still missing some portion of our sovereignty. The limits of our state, particularly right now with the COVID-19, we could see it easily. And the restlessness of the youth in terms of finding more opportunities are all indicators that there is something missing. And this is where the Pan-African Federalism movement has moved the orientation of the Pan-Africanism toward African unity, the unification of our state, to give to our youth more opportunities to be able to protect Africans from wherever they are in the world. So Pan-Africanism is alive and actually has a mission for this generation.
Well, currently we have a surge of nationalistic sentiments across the globe. How does Pan-Africanism deal with that, considering some of the proponents of these ideologies are very powerful global players?
Pan-Africanism is about solidarity among African people, consciousness of the fact that we need to be together in order to face all the difficulties that we are confronted with. So this nationalism is due to the fact that today the world is globalized, and the jobs in some of these countries are being exported to other countries. So people feel like it's because of others coming into their countries that these jobs are stolen, which is not the case. But the answer for us Africans is to not need to go in those countries, and that we have so much resources on our continent that a unification will indeed help us be able to have access to these resources, have the means to exploit them, and be able to provide jobs and anything that any African will need. So yes, this must be a call for us, a call for action, a call for action, a call for awareness, heightened awareness in terms of the limits of our state, which are forcing us to actually resent or feel the power of these nationalists in these different countries. But unity should be the answer, in our opinion, in the Pan-African Federalist movement. If we unite, then we will be a power. And even the repercussion of all these nationalism, we will have a power that protects Africans from wherever they are in the world. So people will think twice before they do anything to Africans, because as Americans are not touched in anywhere where they are, Africans will feel protected by that government that will be able to talk to this government in equal terms. But our state, our standalone unit cannot.
Yeah, Doctor, how feasible is the push for the unification of Africa? Because, I mean, in a decade of considering it's been a campaign that is yet to bear fruit 50 years later after it was conceptualized.
You know, my sister, I would just say that when you are boiling, when you are trying to cook some food, in the beginning, you cannot expect it to be hot. When Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, Bartolome Boganda, Lumumba and others, and Sheikh Anta Diop, Ban Barka came on board, you know, the African people were not aware of the limits of their states. So the mobilization for unity, even in East Africa, it was something, but it was not that clear in their mind what would this unity bring. And they did not know the limits of the states. Today, the African youth, the Pan-African Federalist movement, is aware that an overwhelming majority of the African youth is ready for unity. And this youth is on their power, their energy, that we are going to ride to go to a united African state before the end of this decade. And we are convinced the youth is only waiting for a leadership. And the Pan-African Federalist Movement is providing them with a leadership that will bring Africa to a united African state that will be able to sit at the Security Council of the United Nations with a veto power.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Jume Faye. He is a researcher in political development strategies and also the Secretary General of the IPC, Pan-African Federalist Movement. On to other news that's making headlines now. Burundi's ruling party candidate and retired General Viviers Ndayishimiye has won the presidential election. The Electoral Commission says Ndayishimiye got 68.72% of the votes cast, ahead of the opposition candidate Agathon Rwasa, who received 24.19% of the votes. Around 87% of the 5.11 million registered voters took part in the polls. Ndayishimiye will now replace President Pierre Nkurunziza, who has ruled for 15 years. The vote was preceded by political violence, including murder and arrest of opposition candidates. There was also controversy over holding the election during the global coronavirus crisis. On to Nigeria now, where for nearly a decade the country's northeast has been faced with a refugee crisis following violent attacks by terrorist group Boko Haram. The UN's refugee agency, UNHCR, estimates that about 2.5 million people live in IDP camps. But living conditions in these camps remains a major concern due to challenges in observing social distancing and proper hygiene amid the outbreak. CDTN's Kelechi Emekalama reports.
For the past 2.5 years, this IDP camp has been home to Amina Tella and her 8 children. Amina and many others have been forced to live in crowded and unhygienic conditions due to Boko Haram's insurgency. No less than 11 people live in a small space like this. Sometimes they could be even more. This increases the risk of spreading the coronavirus.
That coronavirus, we've been hearing about it. They educated us on how to stay safe by always washing and sanitizing our hands, the use of face masks, maintaining social distance, even in tricycle. They taught us some of the symptoms of the disease like fever, coughing, and difficulty in breathing. We pray to God to protect us from this coronavirus. I use face mask that was given to us. When I get to the shop, we try as much as possible to maintain social distance.
Camp officials and humanitarian organizations have been stepping up to enlighten IDPs on the pandemic. In addition to general personal hygiene, they've introduced temperature checks and have banned group gatherings.
Managing the feeding and then maintaining social distance is not a problem in Bio camp. When the food is brought to the camp and taken to our office, a token is being shared to the persons of concern. From the range of 1 to 50 or 1 to 100, the token has been distributed to them, and then I or any of my officials called out the name, like numbers given to them. Like number 1, they will come forward, wash their hands with soap and water, sanitize their hand, and then the food will be given to them. So in terms of the food distribution, we are just fine. There is no problem at all. They don't have to queue to collect food.
But observing social distancing is difficult in crowded areas like this. Aid has been insufficient for vulnerable communities, and sanitary supplies too are limited. So many IDPs like Amina are hoping they'll be able to return to their original homes soon.
If I'm given the chance, I'll leave the camp because it is not my home. Everybody loves their comfort. If they could allow us to return to a village at Doronbaga, we'll be very happy because we are more relaxed and comfortable there. Our husbands will return to their farmlands.
The COVID-19 pandemic has already spread to the northeastern states. Vulnerable groups here are at a higher risk of contracting the virus. With a poor healthcare situation in the region, preventing a spread in IDP camps remain a priority for state authorities and camp officials. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
I'll be back for more news from around the continent, including your sport news. But for now, let's take a look at what's happening in the world of business with Uche.
Thank you, Hannah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Nigeria's first quarter growth slows down as effects of coronavirus begin to show. And South Africa's taxi industry steps up its safety measures as the country prepares to ease restrictions.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Well, let's start off in Nigeria. The country's economy grew 1.87% in the first 3 months of 2020 from a year earlier. Now, this was, however, slower than the previous quarter, as we saw oil prices and international trade falling due to the coronavirus pandemic. It is the slowest quarterly growth rate in 1.5 years, at a time when the West African nation is still recovering from a 2016 recession that sent more than 13 million people into unemployment. Now, the slowed growth comes as the government expects Africa's largest economy to contract this year as much as 8.9% in a worst-case scenario. The non-oil sector was also hit, growing by just 1.55%, which was down 0.72% from the last 3 months of 2019. Meanwhile, in South Africa, the country's taxi industry is stepping up safety measures as it prepares to downgrade its COVID-19 lockdown to level 3 from June 1st. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced on Sunday a further easing of South Africa's coronavirus lockdown, allowing the vast majority of the economy to return to full capacity. Here's CGTN's Julie Shire with more.
Taxis aren't the safest mode of transport in South Africa, but they're the cheapest and most popular. The industry is doing all it can to keep passengers and drivers safe from COVID-19. Wearing masks and hand cleaning is compulsory. Sanitizing booths are now being included to boost protection.
It's a simple technology that does not require a lot of things. You don't even stand inside, you just walk through slowly and it immediately disinfects you. It is very necessary to put this precaution in place because we want to flatten the curve first of all, and this big rank like this one, these are the big hubs rank where a lot of people they interchange. You know, they're coming from townships.
This is the new reality for thousands of taxi rank passengers being sanitized from tip to toe, all in the hope to curb the spread of the virus.
I feel very safe because the taxi industry is actually following the rules and the regulations of the COVID-19. The government is putting pressure on them. That is why everywhere you go, you see there's booth, there's sanitizers, there's everything.
I think it's a good one. They should do it even in deep slot, in these rural areas. They should try using it everywhere. So in deep slot, we just sanitize our hands. We need to get something like this. That will be much safer.
Other precautions include driver screenings and regular disinfecting of vehicles and ranks.
We've been cleaning the rank thoroughly and make sure that the rank is clean, and also disinfecting the vehicle itself, inside and outside. And we've also educated our drivers and queue marshal that inside the vehicle where there's handles, they must carry on disinfecting the handles of the vehicles and inside the taxis.
In general, taxi drivers are in danger of transporting people every day. It's so overwhelming. If we can all follow the precautions that we've been given by our leaders. Wear your mask, leave the house only if you have to for essential stuff. And then maybe we can be able to go back to our normal life sooner than later.
Millions are expected to be on the move again as restrictions ease in June. The industry is hoping measures taken will prevent further infections. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba Group is hoping to become a digital game changer in Africa through the Electronic World Trade Platform. Through virtual platforms, it is setting the drive towards globalization by reducing barriers to trade for small and
World Trade Platform is helping to connect African trade.
We definitely believe in the future of globalization. In fact, I'm very optimistic about the future of globalization. So actually, digital platform, digital economy, or with digital infrastructure become even more important to drive globalization during this particular era when the world is impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Rwanda's Gorilla Coffee, which is available on Alibaba's platforms, has seen over 20 million Chinese coffee lovers access the product through Tmall, a subsidiary online platform of Alibaba. First proposed by Alibaba Group founder Jack Ma in 2016, the Electronic World Trade Platform has been recognized by the G20 and has launched in China, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Malaysia, and Belgium. The EWTP, an Alibaba-led initiative, aims to reduce barriers to global trade for small and medium-sized enterprises in Africa and globally through e-commerce.
We're trying to empower the Rwanda coffee producers to produce more coffee that is more tailored for Chinese people, Chinese consumers' taste. So in that case, we do see great future for its market promise in China.
Rwandan coffee has become increasingly popular in China, with branded coffee chains like Starbucks stocking it. Rwandan producers are now able to sell directly to a much larger set of customers than before, while bypassing costly intermediaries.
We were able to sell coffee. In 1 second, we sold 3,000 tons of coffee on the Jack Ma Electronic World Trade Platform. We hope we can do more of that. Africa itself is doing the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement conversations, where we hope to open our own continental markets to trade more, to trade better, and to produce more goods that eventually we can also sell to China.
Rwandan farmers who used to earn only $1 for a kilogram of coffee beans have since seen their incomes increase substantially since the introduction of the EWTP. For now, Alibaba has signed agreement with Rwanda and Ethiopia to develop EWTP in Africa. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Now, many businesses in Africa have been hit hard by the disruption to supply lines caused, of course, by the COVID-19 pandemic. In Zimbabwe, the energy industry is calling for partnerships with Chinese manufacturers to shift base to the continent in order to cushion companies from such shocks. Here's CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya reporting from Harare.
Under normal circumstances, hundreds of solar light bulbs would be coming off Global Solar's production line. The company has benefited from the high quality and reasonably priced components it imports from China, which it uses to produce appropriate technology for a country that's facing an energy deficit and battling disease outbreaks.
Like the rechargeable bulb, how it works is when there is no zesa, when there is zesa, it charges. When there is no zesa, then it will take about 3 to 4 hours lighting up the system, lighting up the whole house. If you have maybe, let's say, 8 rooms, you just need 8 bulbs and you can go for about 4 hours with the lighting. And the mosquito light here in Africa, I think that's the best solution, usually in summer or also when there is a lot of rain, to cater for the mosquito seasons.
But COVID-19 has brought operations to a standstill, forcing most of the company's 25-strong workforce to stay at home. Amidst the uncertainty, there's an opportunity to start producing the imported parts locally through partnerships with Chinese investors who can provide the capital and technical expertise.
What we have to do us in Africa is also to learn from them. We go there, we learn, and we come and then also make sure that we improve the technology locally. Like you see, we went there, we managed to acquire knowledge on how do we produce LED bulbs. Now we are doing it homegrown. Maybe the next step is to see where we can cut the value chain, start producing here, or even to partner them here. They come and produce some of the things that we are getting from there. They come here, they do it locally. We remove all the cost of transportation, especially with this COVID. It's also in their best interest to come and partner us, and we do everything from a local standing. because of the movement of cargo, which is a problem.
Should that happen, it will create more jobs, generate much needed foreign direct investment, and help the country achieve its industrialization ambitions. Farang Makutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, let's head to Germany now. The country has been unraveling its lockdown measures faster than most other countries in Europe. Hairdressers have been one of the first business types to reopen. And as CGTN's Guy Henderson reports, the sector's new norm is putting pressure on the whole sector.
At Beardy Boy's barber shop, beard trimming is now a rarity. Before all this, a luxury that was unavoidably up close and personal. Now, well, that's just not the done thing. It's one of many differences owner Silvio Kolbel's adapting to as businesses reopen. Interaction with customers isn't what it was either. Feels like being in a hospital, Silvio says. Very unpleasant. Customers are still coming. Entrepreneur Jonas Benjamin would have come sooner to fix his unruly mop after 6 months without a chop.
No, I think it was just super busy and actually difficult to get an appointment.
All customers must pay €5 extra now, a hygiene fee that's commonplace across the sector. Costs are higher, and while rents were paused, ultimately they must still be paid.
Short-term emergency aid was a drop in the ocean, maybe a third of our usual revenue. It's just a little help, but what is broken cannot be replaced.
Coming to a place like this is supposed to be a real experience. Customers come in and make themselves a drink, maybe read a magazine, but in the new norm, none of those things are allowed anymore. Instead, they're encouraged to turn up just a few minutes before their appointment and wait outside until they're called. Dennis Mascht is from the Berlin Hairdressers Guild and runs a chain of upmarket salons. Their larger size helps with social distancing and they have a decent financial cushion. Many smaller businesses have neither.
Also die Prognosen sind halt böse Zungen behaupten, dass bis zu 30%.
The pessimists predict that up to 30% of salons will not survive this scenario in the long run. Realistically, I think that it will definitely hit 15 to 20% who just can't go on because it doesn't make financial sense anymore.
Back at Beardy Boy, Silvio's still smiling. He's sure looking forward to the day, though, when he no longer has to hide it. Guy Henderson, CGTN, Berlin.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, banks in Kenya have restructured their loans worth over $1.6 billion as the coronavirus pandemic hurts various sectors of the economy. Well, on that coming up top of the hour. For now, it is back to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Uche. Well, we are going to take a short break and return. Something from our Touch of Africa series. In Touch of Africa, mandatory masks made into fashion accessories in Africa.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Many countries have made it compulsory to wear masks in public to prevent the spread of COVID-19. On the African continent, there is a trend to make masks stylish. Local tailors and designers are combining style and safety by creating colorful masks with African fabric. Let's take a look.
there was a big shortage, we realized, of masks, that can be usable every day without having to throw it away. So that's what brought about the idea. But at the same time, you seeing that masks are going to be an everyday thing, you want to mask in style, so to say.
In the beginning of the pandemic, I thought that this was going to last just maybe a few months. Now I do believe that in the next 2 years, maybe, we're going to have to adapt and live with this virus. And, I think as a fashion designer, we're going to have to integrate with each outfit fashion masks, basically.
Your sport news is coming after the break. Here's the highlight. Kenya joins the world in embracing e-sport amid the global lockdown.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's get into the world of sport. We begin with some sad news. Cameroonian Joseph Boassé Perfection has passed away after suffering a heart attack on Sunday night. The former AS Roma Academy trainee never played a match for the Rome-based club after being recruited. During his time in the Italian capital, he featured 11 times for the club's youth team. Boassé later spent time out on loan with Vicenza in Serie B in 2017 before his contract at Roma ran out in 2018. The 21-year-old midfielder joins a list of Cameroonian footballers who have suffered heart problems, including Marc Vivien Foe and Patrick Ekeng, who also died in similar circumstances. Like many countries affected by the global COVID-19 crisis, sporting activity has ground to a halt in Kenya. Enthusiasts in the East African country have now turned to esports to fill the gap, as CGTN's Muhammad Abubakar now reports.
COVID-19 has shaken up the sporting world, but globally, esports is on the rise since it can continue uninterrupted. In Kenya, Farid Kipirash, a founder of La Galat, a content creation hub that feeds the gaming community with interesting material, agrees that this is an exciting time for esports.
The stay-home directive has definitely helped esports, indirectly of course, but when you're confined in a space and the only thing that you can do in that space is interact with what you can reach, you'll see that certain things sort of skyrocketed and peaked. The gaming industry is no different, so esports has sort of benefited from this period indirectly.
However, despite being in a strong position for growth, esports still faces numerous challenges.
Funding and that sort of access to these tournaments, these esports tournaments and even online tournaments is definitely a challenge in terms of like furthering the sport. The second challenge I see is the audience. For anything to thrive, you need to have an audience that demands the content, that wants the content. So for me, I basically see this as a challenge, because if the audience doesn't know this exists and is a consumable avenue for content, you will have very low numbers, and this proves a challenge in terms of ratings. And if your ratings are low, there will be fewer people willing to invest in your sport.
The setbacks have served as motivation, and according to Farid, the future is only going to get brighter for esports.
I'd say the future of esports is quite inviting because the bigger budgets across the board, there's more players getting involved and the audience is ever growing. So with a genre that's so niche, used to be so niche at least, esports and video gaming in general is growing, and it's looking to go into this space whereby it becomes the top form of entertainment.
With the right investments, esports in Kenya and Africa at large has something to look forward to in the near future. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
La Liga President Javier Tebas has said he hopes a derby between Real Betis and Sevilla will kick the Spanish top flight season back into action on June the 11th.